Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has announced a review into the government's controversial net zero agenda, including proposals to delay the sale of new petrol and diesel cars and phasing out the installation of new gas boilers by 5 years, putting it back to 2035.
Whilst the Prime Minister said he remained committed to the 2050 net zero target and received support from some members of his party, other Conservative MPs expressed outrage at the plans, with possible rumours of no confidence letters if the plans come to fruition.
Well, GB News political editor Christopher Hope joins us now live from Downing Street. Christopher, a significant moment in Rishi's premiership here. Quite a departure from their 2050 targets of net zero. How do you think this will play out with the public? And also, the second point, is this like a new Brexit? It seems to be dividing the Conservative Party right down the middle.
And quite certainly, Martin, Rishi Sunak has ripped off the plaster of unity that has been holding his party together since he became leader in those rather sort of strange, tortuous times back in October last year. It's a big deal what he's doing today. I would argue it's the biggest political gamble he's taken of his premiership because it's so divisive. We've got Zach Goldsmith, a Boris Johnson ally, tweeting today that he's justifying why he resigned from the government a few weeks ago and saying we need an election now. We've got elements of this announcement leaked to the BBC last night. We've got the agenda, purportedly, of the actual cabinet meeting that's just taking place by conference call to sign off on these plans, leaked to another journalist at lunchtime. We haven't seen this degree of an unstable government since the back end of Boris Johnson. I think that's a worry for Sunak. He'll hope, though, that he can land his messages right and get the right of the party, the right wing of the party, united behind his plans. And that's what he's hoping for this afternoon when he gives his press conference at 4:30 in the building behind me.
As you might expect, Chris, the Labour Party has jumped on this, blaming Rishi Sunak's expected announcement today on the influence of Liz Truss and what she said on Monday. I mean, surely she doesn't hold much sway.
Yeah.
Does she?
I think that's a wrong reading of Tory party politics, if I can be so bold as to say that about the Labour Party. I mean, no, that isn't the case, but there's no question that this really is where maybe Mr Sunak might be happier anyway with his own politics, because he's concerned about going too far ahead of where people are. There's a cost of living crisis going on. Of course, we have seen falling inflation, but still up by 6.7% in the CPI index in August. So that's good news, but of course they want to try and find a way to take the country with them, and they've looked at that result in the ULEZ by-election, the Uxbridge by-election, which was defined by that ULEZ issue in Greater London, and the Tories are clearly thinking if they can try and drive a wedge over the issue of green politics with Labour, they might hang on to more seats the next election. I mean, the election campaign really has started today, Martin and Pippa.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. This is the key point. This will be divisive in those Liberal Democrat Tory seats. But this is the red wall pledge, isn't it? This is the cost of living. This is what it means for the pounds and the pence in your pocket. The Tories must have taken advice on this, and they must know it's going to land well with the hard-working classes.
That's right, it's definitely what they call a wedge issue, isn't it, with the left. And Mr Sunak recognises, I mean, he's been saying repeatedly, he told us at the G20 10 days ago how important it is to cut inflation, and that's like a tax cut for those on the lowest incomes, because, of course, inflation affects everyone regardless of means. And that's why he gets that, and he's obviously aware of his own privilege, he's worked hard for his fortune in part. So he recognises that he's trying to deliver for people in the red wall, and that's where he's weakest, because, of course, that reshuffle a few weeks ago when Ben Wallace was replaced by three people from the south of England in his top ministerial team is a problem for him. He's got to try and reach out to the seats that Boris Johnson won and show them he cares about them too.
OK, Christopher Hope, thank you for all the latest live from Downing Street on this monumental day.
There's plenty of reaction, including quite an angry one from some businesses. Energy giant E.ON has joined the criticism, saying the delay risks condemning people to many more years of living in cold and drafty homes that are expensive to heat, in cities clogged with dirty air from fossil fuels, and that net zero is an opportunity to transform our economy and the lives of people across the country. And the government needs to think again before abandoning our climate commitments for this decade.
Fascinating stuff. Well, with us now is Michaela Kendall, CEO of Adderley. Welcome to the live desk. So what do you make of this announcement, a seeming U-turn, a rollback on 2050 net zero policies. What do you make of it?
Well, net zero 2050 goals are essential to meet our climate commitments and to stabilise global temperatures. We've all been seeing these catastrophic weather events recently, and we understand that this is necessary. So to row back on these this legislation now, it seems out of step absolutely with the rest of the world. New York are currently having their New York Climate Week, and they're announcing accelerated policies. They're not rowing back. Businesses themselves, E.ON you've just mentioned, but also Ford, have said that they need ambition, they need commitment and consistency, and businesses require that to make their own plans going forward. So if there were some good plans in place, it shouldn't cost extra money, it should actually be saving people money.
We should explain, Michaela, that your company is a fuel cell company, specialising in hydrogen, isn't it? You're based in Birmingham. What do you think of the argument that the timing on this is so wrong, though? People aren't just going to be able to afford to go electric, and actually delaying this ban is only falling in with what the EU are doing anyway. The EU is saying it's going to be 2035.
Yeah, so the UK has positioned itself as a leader in net zero policy. So if you are a leader in net zero policy, you should be ahead of others at least. And if this brings us back in line with the EU, then we're not leading, are we? So I think there's got to be some consistency in the messaging around the policies. In terms of cost of living crisis, you're absolutely right. People are facing economic challenges like never before, and I think that everybody needs to tighten their belts, but that again goes back to planning. If you can plan well, you should be saving money, and I think what this policy illustrates is a failure of planning to electrify vehicles, for example, where infrastructure is not working correctly, as it is in other countries. And hydrogen, we've actually got a hydrogen strategy that was brought in by Kwasi Kwarteng in August 2021, but that saw a reduction in the availability of hydrogen for refueling vehicles. So there has to be consistency in the messaging and the policy making. That's a key thing. But also you need to plan adequately and manage systems properly in order to deliver net zero policies in reality. And perhaps the government have realised that.
Well, Michaela, perhaps the government have also realised something else, and that is net zero is proving to be incredibly expensive for the average person in the street. Scrapping cars, scrapping boilers, suddenly it's hammering home. And in fact, the government's own climate committee report in 2022 said the net cost of net zero by 2050 is £1.4 trillion, which adds up to £5,000 a year, every year, for every British household until 2050. So maybe, is this a moment of the morality of net zero facing the money?
So investments into green infrastructure are absolutely critical. They're not an option. So that's an absolute essential for society. As I said, climate change is an acknowledged, scientifically credible activity. We know that this is happening. We need to do something about it. Investments into other infrastructures are still ongoing. So into fossil fuels and into other road infrastructure, for example. So this is not necessarily an additional cost. This is a different cost. You're making a political decision on what to invest in, and there are alternatives. And I think overall, environmental policies should be conserving resources and therefore should be cheaper. They should not be more expensive. So it depends on how you present the numbers.